So today I want to talk about my first trial. Just a while ago, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I remembered I had never thought about it for so long. Why is it that I'm so interested in trials? There are a bunch of reasons, but I witnessed my first trial when I was 17, and I'll tell you about it. Welcome to Real Life and Archetypes. My name is Marina. So I watch a bunch of trials every year. It's something that I'm very interested in. It's something that I've spoken of before in my videos. It's a very good exercise for the mind just to see how easy it is to get manipulated. And if you pay attention to what you're thinking, there's a lot going on. Now, I suddenly remembered, well, I actually witnessed a criminal trial. I was 17, I was back in Paris when I used to live there. I was born and raised in France, and I used to live in Paris for a few years. And my roommate's boyfriend was part of the defense team. He was, a super lawyer because these people were very VIPs, even the defendant. It was a huge case. I was 17. I had no idea about who any of these people were, neither, the lawyers or the guy. But let me just show you a picture. So this was the defendant, Didier Calmels, and he shot his wife with a hunting rifle during an argument, and it was discussed as a crime of passion because she confessed to seeing her lover again. So this is significant information, not in his defense, but because of something else that I will tell you later. But let me just introduce you to Georges Kiechman, who was the lawyer. And one of his assistants, co-chairs, was my roommate's boyfriend, and they're married. They're still married and together today. So that was in 1990. Okay, so I was 17 back then, and this trial made a huge impact on me because I think it was the first time that I really became super aware of, the influence that people can have on others through the mind tricks, and people who are very talented at that. I talk about that all the time. I have a lot of the mind archetype in my own charts, and that's why it's such an interesting subject. So the only lawyer that I remember in that trial was Mr. Georges Kiechman. So this man. I do not remember the prosecution. He was that good. And my memory is very fuzzy, but I remember just a few things, and that's what I wanted to mention. The guy, the defendant, let me just go back to the defendant for a second, Mr. Didier Calmels. This is a current picture. He's 73 now, but he was much younger then. I remember him as being quite skinny, tiny, very French, typical French. This man had shot his wife in the middle of an argument, whatever. He was a super big businessman. He was in a Formula One. He was a co-owner of a Formula One team. For those who don't know, Formula One is a racing car, huge thing in Europe and in many other places. It's not that big of a deal in the United States, but in the rest of the world, it is. Formula One is a big thing, and he had his team, which was Larousse Calmels. So the guy, in those circles, the Formula One circles, let me just say, let me try to find the words that people in those circles, they are always with the ladies of the night. Okay, that's the whole marketplace over there. That's the circuit, the Formula One circuit. And it was mentioned during the trial that the guy, of course, had a million affairs. So this, suddenly reaction because his wife, who was, was a typical situation of very rich people. She's very bored or something. He doesn't pay attention. He's always traveling to his Formula One stuff. They have 4 kids. They have a discussion. He shoots her. and she loses her life as a result. I have to be careful with the language here because of YouTube. And then he tries to harm himself. I didn't remember that. I just found out this information. There isn't much online about this case. It's a little difficult. But I did not remember that detail at all. How do you attempt to harm yourself and he survives? I couldn't find out any details. But it was an incredible trial. First of all, I was surrounded by a bunch of women of the area, or that community, very well dressed older women who were there. It was a very small place, so everything was very, very incredible. There was a jury. I did not remember that, but I found out preparing for this show, having a look at, the case. There's a lot of stuff that I just did not remember at all. I did not remember if there was a jury. Anyway, the thing was that the lawyer, Georges Kirchmann, the lawyer for the defense, I just remember him being so incredibly good and so convincing that the point was that I was sitting there. And it was like the first time in my life that it was sort of a duplication of myself. I was aware that he was tricking me and convincing me. And at the same time, I couldn't help but actually being convinced. I don't know how else to explain it. I was thinking, oh my God, it actually, it makes sense. Because at some point, he even argued. So the crime was never in doubt. There was a guilty plea, the whole thing. Was there a guilty plea? Yeah, because the fact that he did it was never in question. The whole thing was about either being acquitted and trying to find mitigating circumstances, hence describing the whole thing as a crime of passion, or to get the lighter sentence possible. The very odd thing was that the mother of the victim, so that was his wife then, the woman, the victim, her name was Dominique Calmels. I don't know if it's Calmel or Calmels. I don't remember. Because sometimes you don't pronounce the S at the end in French, so I do not know. So her mother, one thing I remember, and I cannot fact check this now because there isn't much information online because it's from 1990. The crime occurred in 1989 and the trial was in 1990. But as I remember, and I may be mistaken, the mother of the victim was someone who had a prominent position in the French army as a woman, a pioneer, actually. That's what I remember. Her name, I cannot find any photo, but her name was Geneviève Le Creuret. Oh, yeah, Le Creuret. So that was, I didn't put in that because I don't have a photo of her. But I remember she was introduced as someone who was in the French army in a high position. I may have seen a document about Geneviève Le Creuret with a captain status in 1971. Maybe it's her. I do not know. I seem to remember that they said she was the first female general or a colonel or something. Anyway, she was of a high status. And this matters. Why? Because she testified in favor of him, the guy who had killed her daughter. And you'd think, well, that's odd. Well, no, she really came off as someone very pragmatic. And you can imagine back in those days, a woman high up in the French army would have quite a particular way of being, quite a character. And she was very pragmatic. And the issue was that she had 4 grandchildren. And that's what was on her mind. And what she was looking for was, either acquittal, she was with the defense, or the lightest sentence possible because she was older. And she was saying, I don't want my grandchildren to suddenly be without a mother who is already gone and a father who is in jail for a long time. Well, a long time is not something that exists in Europe. People have very light sentences. Anyway, that was one of the surprises. The other was how the defense lawyer, Kirchmann, really presented his case and tried to create this scene about how, the situation with the wife really affected the defendant emotionally so much that there came this discussion and this confession on her part that she had gone back to have an affair with an old lover that she'd been with before. We're talking about the defendant who is, in the Formula One circuit where he is philandering, let's say, with the ladies of the night all the time, as said and established in the trial. I'm not just assuming that. They said that in the trial. So I guess the prosecution said that. Excuse me. So the question was that the defense lawyer was so good. He really was setting the stage for all of that stuff. And it was really affecting us. And we were reacting in the courtroom. I remember those women around me really reacting at some point, at different points of the trial. But at some point, and that was like the biggest, very dramatic thing that happened. And I'm sorry to talk about this in those terms because we're talking about someone who was, unalived, as we say on YouTube. So this is about a serious matter. But I'm talking from the point of view of a 17-year-old girl who was just witnessing something that was just incredible. So they were talking about that lover and really making everybody feel. I remember the feeling mostly about this trial. And it's like, oh my God, what a horrible person. And the lover entered the courtroom. And I remember that entrance, and this is my memory. Who knows what the facts were? I do not know. But the entrance was so dramatic. And the guy, already because of what the defense lawyer had been telling us, we already all hated him. And in my mind, again, I had this, two thoughts at the same time, like, oh my God, he's telling me a story. I'm hooked, but I know that, he's defending his client. I had that awareness already, even back then. Enters the lover. The guy is like super tall. And the defendant, to me, as I remember him, very tiny and skinny, typical French physical guy, very. Bleh. So enters the lover, Latin lover, clearly, and very tall, very muscular. You could say attractive, not my type at all, because I know the kind, and especially in Paris, they abound, that kind of guy, and the way that they seduce women, So for me, it was a subject that I was like, oh my God, it's one of those, So the guy enters, and it was like a soap opera. I swear to God that there was a sigh in the room, and that we all said, just because, first of all, of the resentment we already felt towards him, and also because the guy was impressive. He was, I don't remember if the face, I mean, to me, he didn't seem attractive, was not my type, but he was impressive physically. And mind you, he had a suit on, but this was like a soap opera. He had hair, as I remember it. And mind you, my memory might have extended the length of his hair, but I remember he had, first of all, loose hair and down almost to his waist, very long hair. And he walked in like a tiger. I mean, the door opened and the guy walked in like that. I remember that very clearly because I'm telling you, I really think we all said at the same time, So he came in, it was so dramatic. And then Georges Kirchmann, the defense lawyer, he pummeled him to really make it look like a really horrible guy, which he probably was, one of those seducers of women. I know the type, I have my opinion, and I'm entitled to my opinion. I'm not going to go into it, but yeah, I could have, agreed with that point of view, that was the kind of person just, of course, seducing women and taking advantage of them. But he was pummeled by the defense. And at some point, I cannot remember what was said, but at some point we clapped at something that the defense lawyer said. And it was like a catharsis, at a moment where, it was really to be aggressive towards that witness who was the lover. And the judge had to call our attention to stay quiet. But we all clapped or something. I really think I remember that. Here's the thing. In the end, so aside from that witness, the testimony of the mother-in-law pleading in favor of her son-in-law and saying, as I read that, I don't remember, but I read in an article preparing for this show, that she said that anyway, that guy, that lover, wasn't really her daughter's type. It's just, anyway. So at the end, I remember that the defense lawyer was actually describing the scene. That's what I remember. The scene of a discussion. The guy has his hunting rifle, apparently threatening to unalive himself, I think. And the wife saying, "Don't be ridiculous," or something. And then she says, "I've been seeing my lover," or something like that. I don't remember that. I read that. But I do remember what Kirchmann, the defense lawyer, said, which was he spent, I don't know how long, describing really the moment about pulling the trigger and putting the doubt in your mind that actually the defendant did not mean to pull the trigger, but the trigger was, just too easy. And from what I read in an article, there was an expert testimony. I do not remember because I don't remember much. There was an expert testimony of an expert who said that indeed that hunting rifle had a very soft trigger. In any case, the mind trick about going to that detail, that in the end, the argument was saying he didn't actually mean to pull the trigger, and therefore the death of the victim was an accident. To me, that was extraordinary. It just blew my mind because I was listening and I was thinking, this is so convincing. And at the same time, I know this is a trick and this is BS. So I had these two thoughts fighting each other. In any case, that man was not acquitted, and he was sentenced to 6 years in jail and was released after 2 years. Welcome to the European justice system, everyone. So that's how it is. And he was convicted. Let me just read some notes. He was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. So voluntary manslaughter, sentenced to 6 years, released after 2 years. And he successfully rebuilt his career and, in high profile business deals. He's a very wealthy man, again, going and doing his thing. So he was quite lucky to get only 2 years. Oh, God. So that was, the thing about this trial that really, really, it was mind-blowing to me to see just how much someone can really influence you. And the thing is, I can't say about this trial anything about the back and forth between the defense and the prosecution, because I don't remember at all. They didn't make an impression on me, the prosecution. I do not remember anything about them. What I wanted to mention is that this, what people call fascination with true crime or trials, is something that has an explanation, and it's actually archetypal. Now, yes, of course, there are some people who are, there for um, whatever quirk they have for true crime, but a lot of us watch true crime and trials as a healing thing, as a catharsis, to be able to deal with the things that we have endured, and to look at a process where hopefully there is some outcome of justice, and also to face darkness. This is part of an archetype that's called the shadow. And by the way, the shadow is a concept that I did not invent. It is something that a lot of people know about, but I call that archetype the shadow because it relates to that. And it is about being able to look at the dark side of the human experience. And the whole process about that is to also actually look at the darkness that we all have inside, which most people refuse to acknowledge. Everybody, is such a good person. And of course, what we do is that we look at the worst example of darkness so that we can avoid having to look at things that are dark inside of us. So we construct an enemy. Again, this is a quote from Sam Keen, and I don't have it to print on the screen, but it says, "The enemy is constructed from denied aspects of the self." It's a very complicated thing. I talk about it in a video called Empowerment versus Transformation. But anyway, the shadow is the one that is going to make us deal with the darkness of the human experience. We're going to construct an enemy. So, for example, if you've been a victim and you watch a trial, there's a sense, of it's like it's your predator there, and that, maybe the trial is going to give you a sense that somebody's going to pay for it. And maybe in your case, there wasn't anything like that. There are many reasons why people watch, but I can tell you that because of the communities that I join, a lot of them are victims. And they watch trials for that reason. There's something, that they need to just watch every step and know everything because they're reliving and trying to process their own stories. And you face the darkness, and you face your fears, and you face your pain, and there's the beginning of transformation and healing that happens in that process. And that's why so many people do that. And that's the main reason that people follow trials. If you talk to them, most of them have endured something. And so that's why it is so interesting. But I did not remember that I had been physically in a criminal trial when I was a teenager. For some reason, I had, it was out of my mind. And when I remembered it, I thought, oh my God, actually, I've been doing this all my life. And now that I can watch things on YouTube, because in the United States, they actually broadcast trials, which I think is a great thing. And all of them should be broadcasted. By the way, in this trial that I witnessed in France, I've been doing some research online because I didn't remember if there was a jury. There was a jury, and the jury, because I was investigating, it's not very often that trials have juries. It's not, in Spain or in France, which are the two countries that I'm from, it's very rare. But in France, what is even more special is that a jury is composed of citizens, but also professional judges. So they have a combination of professionals and citizens as part of the jury, to have this combination of, people who have an understanding of the law, and then to make it also democratic. This is a system that was introduced during the French Revolution, after the French Revolution. So I thought that was an interesting piece of data to know. So that guy had a jury, and they actually condemned him for I think it was almost the maximum sentence that he was supposed to get for that crime, which is not a lot. He got 6 years, but was out in 2. Again, let me repeat that, for killing someone. But it was, a crime of passion and affairs and whatever. Some people are going to say it's very French. Well, I don't know. This is just awful to me. But anyway, so I wanted to talk about this also because we've been just watching the Karen Reed trial, and it was quite long. And I usually watch 1 or 2 trials a year, but there's an upcoming trial now, which will start in a few days, which is Donna Adelson for the murder of Dan Markel. And so, thinking about trials and talking about trials, I just wanted to link that to this thing that now I'm going to have to watch another trial, because I've been following that case for a few years now. And of course, I want to be able to watch that trial, and hopefully there will be more. We all know, those who follow that case know what I'm talking about, which is hopefully they get Wendy Adelson very soon as well. So I'm just going to leave you with this, and hopefully you like this video, and I will see you very soon. Thank you.